That's totally okay. And I think we're going to go live recording now. I don't think we're live just else everywhere yet, but we can always edit that part out. Anyway, let me do the introductions. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the meetmagic podcast. I'm Carl. I'm the founder of meetmagic, which is a platform for business leaders to make new connections, solve business problems, and support charity at the same time. We're basically a community of over 1,000 business leaders that are determined to change meetings for good. So we donate to charity every time a new business connection is made, allowing business leaders to make their own impact at work. Now, today's chosen charity is the Starlight Children's Foundation, and just for being here, just for the time to talk, through meetmagic, Paul and Richard have been able to support 18 seriously ill children by giving them access to the Starlight Captain's Room, which is a place, as we all know, where happiness exists in the time of need, because happiness matters. So today we're joined by two industry leaders, and today's episode aims to share ideas and inspire creativity around technology, cybersecurity, and digital transformation. I have with me today Paul Zara, the CEO of the Australian Retailers Association, and Richard Metcalf, the Vice President of Transmit Security Asia Pacific in Japan. Richard and Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks. I just want to start off firstly by giving the audience a bit of insight into what you both do. So I'm going to start with Richard. Richard, can you maybe just give us a brief background on you and Transmit Security? I know you just told me about the $500 million raise that you guys did, which is huge, but what attracted you to Transmit and the cybersecurity industry?
Great. Thanks very much, Carl, and great to be with everyone this morning. I've spent the last 20 odd years in cybersecurity, and as you said, currently Vice President for Transmit. Transmit really provides people and organisations with a secure digital identity that they can simply use across all their digital needs, whether it's within the app, within the web channel, through live chat, social media, via the contact centre.
Ooh, we lost him.
Delivering a great customer experience wrapped up in a secure channel.
That's really interesting. And what about you, Paul? I mean, how did you come to be at the helm of the Retailers Association? But more importantly, what are your thoughts about what is going on in the industry right now?
Well, look, the Australian Retailers Association, the best way for me to describe it is it's the union for employers, for retailers. So we look after the interests of the retail industry. It's the largest private employer in the country, $360 billion, 1.3 million people work in the industry, 1 in 10 Australians. And we look at ways to protect, unify, train, educate, recruit, and a myriad of other things that we do. It's sort of a one-stop shop for retailers. And our history has been born through industrial relations, but of course we're much more than that now. So look, I sort of literally fell into this role because I was asked initially to chair the board, and then COVID hit and I stepped in to run the association. And since my tenure, over the last 2 years, we've been pretty much in crisis management. And of course, we saw an acceleration of trends within the industry through that 2-year period. So in my terms, about a decade's worth of trends, which included digital transformation. So for many retailers that were not digitally transformed, they were forced to do that, because particularly small business, because they had no other way of trading through the lockdowns. And in fact, most or many retailers historically saw digital as being very much a disruptor and a pain in the butt, to be frank. But now they see it as an insurance program for their ability to be able to trade. And of course, lots of trends have come out of through COVID, and the industry is in fairly good shape. But equally, with the cost of doing business, cost of living hikes that we're seeing now, we expect that will take its toll in the coming year.
It's kind of interesting. I'd hate to see what your day-to-day looks like. But what are some of the biggest challenges that you're seeing in the retail space at the moment? I mean, obviously the threat landscape for cyber is one thing, but what about the spending, consumer spending? Is that a...
Well, look, the spending has actually remained fairly strong, but we don't see that continuing at the later part of this year. So the last data point we have is the April ABS data with $33.9 billion worth of retail spend. That's a record actually in this country. But of course, the dynamics that we're currently seeing, high cost of living, fuel prices, labour shortages, these are all playing into the overall cost of living issues for consumers, but equally the cost of doing business. So to answer your question, the biggest issue right now that we're facing, which we think is a bigger disruptor than the crisis we saw through COVID, is really sustainability, climate change, and our race to net zero.
That's really interesting, Paul. And Richard, for Transmit, what are some of the challenges in your space that you're seeing within retail?
Yeah, it's interesting, Carl. And I think just touching on some of the points that Paul was making, as we're seeing, the pandemic has really forced a lot of organisations to go through that digital transformation that Paul was referring to. And it's really around how do you turn an unknown consumer into a first-time customer and then into a long-term repeat loyal customer. As we know, sort of 48% of e-commerce trade is from repeat customers. So how do organisations provide a really great customer experience, but not at the expense of sacrificing security or consumer privacy? So obviously, as the significant uptick in e-commerce and retail and the move from bricks to clicks in terms of spending really accelerated, so we've seen the adversaries and cyber criminals look to take advantage of that as well. So that's how do organisations balance a great customer experience, provide a friction-free process, look to provide that kind of Netflix-style personalised experience, but again, in a way that is secure and obviously not impacting them with things like chargeback and fraud and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that I think about, obviously, is the increasing in online activity. I mean, Paul, that would be something that would be front of mind, I'd imagine, for retailers.
Yes, well, look, it's a big issue, right? Because we're seeing this acceleration towards digital transactions, and it's not going to stop. Because what we did see, of course, as the lockdowns were lifted, that there was definitely a return back to physical shopping. But the issue is, of course, we now sort of see the convenience of shopping online, and we're now sort of also seeing the downside of shopping online, which is the cybersecurity type, the fraud issues. And it's a consumer and a retailer issue, of course. So, often consumers give away information because the fraudsters are becoming so clever at getting information and accessing information. It's become an issue for consumers, but for retailers as well, protecting their data, protecting the transaction has become of great concern. And I think, it's one of those issues that people hope somebody else is worrying about. And it's really important within any organisation, there's somebody that's actually accountable for cybersecurity and they're taking the matter seriously.
Yeah, so I mean, the growth in this thing is, for me, is a really interesting space. I mean, Richard, is it possible to create custom user experiences without sacrificing data security, for example?
Yeah, I think it's a really, really important point, Carl. If you look at some of the consumer behaviour, 84% of consumers reuse passwords across multiple sites. If you look at it from a personal perspective, how many online accounts do you have? Most people have somewhere between 50 and 200. It depends on where you kind of sit in the generations. Human nature dictates that people will reuse passwords. And if you look at some of the challenges that the retailers are looking to drive, they want to provide the least amount of friction in the e-commerce process, because they know if they put too much friction into that, it creates cart abandonment. And we have consumer drop-off. The flip side is if there isn't an appropriate amount of security through the process, then they experience fraud and kind of bottom line losses. So it's how do you strike that balance between the two that we're seeing as being really important. And there's a lot of technology advances that we've seen over the last couple of years, and certainly Transmit's at the front of that in terms of not having organisations to be able to deliver a great customer experience and a really secure process, and not have to compromise either of those two for the consumer or the business.
Paul, are you seeing the same thing with retailers? I mean, I know, for example, in the banking world, cyber is like top of mind. They've got risk committees that are all over this, and there's a whole team dedicated to looking at, trying to mitigate that risk. What's the feedback in the consumer, in the retail industry around cyber?
Look, there's no doubt retailers are taking cybersecurity much more seriously than they have in the past. There's no doubt for their own survival they need to. It's becoming much more of a conversation now at board level because of the risk to organisations particularly. So cybersecurity is a big issue in as much as, most certainly large companies will be taking out cybersecurity insurance and they're thinking about ways to tighten things up. But it's still that sort of that Bermuda Triangle. People don't quite understand it. They want somebody else to worry about it. And I think partly the message really is around making sure you've got the right protections in place, the right insurance, the right accountability within the organisation, and then ultimately the right partner on cybersecurity to take the technical worry out of the day-to-day operation, because retailers know how to sell stuff. They're not necessarily good at this stuff, so they don't want to be worrying about cybersecurity. So making sure that you've got the right partner is really important.
Yeah, I've just gone through an experience. I mean, this is no disrespect to the New South Wales government, but I've just gone through an experience where I forgot to renew my car registration, and I was really worried about getting pulled over, because you don't realise, you are treated like a criminal if you get pulled over without any car insurance, or not car insurance, but car registration. So, Richard, to prevent fraud, how do you prevent fraud without treating your customers like a cyber criminal?
Yeah, it's interesting. Cybersecurity is really around enabling organisations to help achieve their objectives. So, a good cybersecurity program as it relates into retail is, how do we provide a really great experience for our genuine customers, and how do we put a high amount of friction and really raise the bar and make it very difficult for cyber criminals. If we look at more at a slightly higher level, the economics of cyber have been really out of whack. It's been incredibly expensive to defend an organisation and very, very relatively cheap to attack it. The good guys have got to be near perfect all of the time, and the bad guys have got to be lucky once. And typically, a really concerted adversary or dedicated adversary is going to find a way into an organisation. If success for an organisation is having no fraud or no data breaches or no customer impact, they're probably setting themselves up for failure. It's how do we start leveling the playing field and leveling up the economics of cybercrime, which is really around, from a customer and a retail perspective, how do we look at reducing the cost of acquisition for customers? How do we deliver a great customer experience that works in a completely omni-channel environment, so from the app into the contact center, into the web channel, and through to live chat. But really, from the challenge with the retail environment in particular is there's a lot of unmanageables or uncontrollables for retailers. They don't control the device that I use to go start my retail experience. They don't control the channel which I choose to engage with them on, and they don't choose the specific journey that I go on as part of my retail experience. So how do they look at a capability or a framework or a tool set that smooths out that experience and can deliver a really consistent, great customer experience with a high degree of security to make that retail experience really seamless?
It's got to be top of agendas for everybody, I think. Paul, if there was a technology that could take away all of the risk of cybersecurity, what would the leaders and the risk committees of the retail industry or the retail companies do?
Well, look, that's a really tough question, because I think, what's happening, this is still sort of, I think we're on this journey together, to be frank, and I'd be interested in Richard's point of view, because I don't think any cybersecurity company can give you a 110% guarantee, but maybe Richard can. So I think it's this concept, because the fraud just keeps getting cleverer and cleverer. I think that's the big problem. So it's making sure you partner with the right organisation with similar values and obviously the same objective that allows people to work together between the retail organisation and the cybersecurity company to get the outcome. Look, I think what retailers are looking for is they just don't want, it's like they don't want no dramas, no problems. So if the cybersecurity company can guarantee that's the case, then they're or at least work together to make sure they minimise the risk.
Yeah, I think it's
a really great point, Paul. It's around risk mitigation. So there is no, like any business risk, there's no silver bullet.
No.
It's around but if you think about it from a customer journey perspective, how do you put controls in place to make sure that when people are creating accounts to start a retail experience, that it is a genuine user that is creating that account and not either a cyber criminal or a bot that's doing that. As you go through the initial account registration and log-on process, how do you make sure that the level of assurance that you have from as a retail perspective is relevant and commensurate with the journey that the customer is going on? If they're hitting your site and just consuming information about your products and services, then you actually need a relatively low level of assurance with that.
Yes.
But if they then go and look to make significant transactions or purchase goods, then you need to increase your level of assurance through that customer journey. I think it's important that from a retail perspective, you apply the appropriate or contextual amount of security or level of assurance based on the customer journey, because you don't want a really low level of assurance if they're looking to make a large purchase or acquisition that puts your organization at risk. Similarly, you don't need a really high level of assurance if they're just going on and exploring your products and capabilities. So it's how do you partner with an organization that can provide an appropriate level of security based on the context of the journey, and again, do so in a really seamless way for the end.
And Richard, I'm also guessing too, the issues are much broader than just desktop, laptop, mobile phone. It goes to text, to voice messaging. It's all those things where people believe they're potentially dealing with a human being and inadvertently clicking on a link and exposing or accessing information quite quickly and easily. So the fraud is quite wide and quite broad. And it comes also down to internal, we talk about external fraud, but also internal fraud with staff and large companies. So it's quite a big issue. And I guess there's a solution as much as having the technology partner that can give you that assurance. But I guess, Richard, I'm sure you're learning as well as you go through this process, your organisation, and what I guess these fraud organisations can actually test you on.
Yeah, there's wherever there's an opportunity to create value, there's typically criminals that look to take advantage of that. And retail is no exception. As we've really seen that acceleration of digital transformation over the last couple of years, we've seen organizations have to really innovate very, very fast in building their own apps, in looking at how they provide a great experience through their web channel, opening up new channels such as live chat and socials, and obviously through the traditional customer experience angle through the contact center. Fraud and cyber criminals are operating across all of those channels. The contact center is by its very nature, our contact center team members' role is to help serve and resolve issues for our customers. So we see a huge amount of fraud going through contact centers that can actually be very difficult to detect. And I'll give you an example. If someone rings a contact center and say, I want to move from paper billing to online billing. And then a week later, well, I want to update my email address from this address to my new email address. And then 2 weeks after that, say, I actually want to change my home address from my existing one to my new address. And then 2 weeks later, they make a substantial purchase. Each of those individual steps within their own right is a perfectly ordinary request via a contact center. But if you string those together without a really good view of your customer and to be able to authenticate and verify your customer at each of those steps in a really fast and seamless way, it's just another example of a lot of fraud going through what is a fairly difficult channel to verify and authenticate.
Richard, what's Transmit's view on where retail is going to be in the next 2 years with fraud? Because I mean, maybe there's something you can share with the viewers, and maybe Paul can take this back to the industry. Where's it going? Where do your leadership see fraud in the retail industry going?
Yeah, I think it's we've seen a 300% increase in account takeover attacks during the pandemic, which is where an adversary tries to steal the credentials of a legitimate customer and use it for nefarious purposes. So we're seeing a very substantial rise in that. At the heart of the issue is really around retailers to be able to understand their customer and to be able to verify that it is a legitimate customer that is trying to interact with them. At the very heart of that is to understand, okay, well, is this a legitimate customer or not? If it is a legitimate customer, then how do I authenticate in a way that doesn't require them to have to remember usernames and passwords and put these really disruptive and friction-filled processes through to complete that verification, identification. And then if you clearly understand who your customer is, then you can start creating these personalized and curated journeys. So I think at the heart of retail, the retail practice is to really understand the customer and to be able to verify quickly and easily and appropriately based in the context of the journey that it is Carl that's looking to go on this journey, and then how do we leverage improved authentication and verification capabilities such as your mobile device or the biometrics on your laptop or the biometrics on your iPad, whatever device you're choosing to interact with them on, to reduce the need or completely eliminate the need to remember usernames and passwords, which are essentially at the root cause of so many of the issues that retailers are facing as it relates to both customer experience and cybersecurity.
And that's why we've meetmagic have partnered with Transmit, because you can use your fingerprint or your eyeball to log on, and we use our face today to log on to our phone. So it just makes logical sense that we're able to do that. Paul, I want to shift it a little bit towards the climate change stuff and the sustainability thing that you spoke about earlier, because I mean the retail industry. Look, I'm a single dad of a daughter. She's 19. She shops a lot. And I watch what she's doing, which is really exciting for me when I see her buying clothes, and then she's actually selling them secondhand for more than she paid for them. Complete entrepreneurial. But there's a charity called Thread Together that's been set up to cater for all of the old stock that rather than go to landfill, it can be used for good purposes. Anthony Chester's running that, which is an amazing charity. We've all volunteered down there and done our bit as a team down there to help. And I just see it growing and growing and growing. It's like all of this wasted clothes. Where's that going to be in the next 2 years? What's being done to sort of cut all that down and slow that waste down?
Well, look, the ARA worked with our retail community to develop a roadmap to net zero. Sorry, I'll get that out eventually. Roadmap to net zero. So we're very focused on climate change specifically from a sustainability point of view. That's a big concern for us. And anyone's interested in seeing that roadmap, they can log onto our website. And whether you're a small or large business, it gives you a really good perspective around how to get to net zero. But talking about trends, the other big trend which you've touched on here, Carl, is that there's this massive move towards, and it's generational, around what we call the circular economy and around people shopping with purpose. So the retail industry is not just out to sell more stuff. It actually is the retailers that have a conscience, of course, and this is the big movement. We surveyed consumers through COVID, and they said they were more concerned about climate change and sustainability than the COVID crisis at the time. So that's really concerning for us. So there's been a massive move towards renting rather than buying. So the whole subscription model around Netflix, Spotify, etc. So there's many organisations now that have gone with a much more of a sustainable conscious, because many outfits that we buy, in fact, don't even see the light of day. We don't realise that, but there's a really high statistics about people wearing, particularly for women, a dress once. So the whole rental movement's been moved in a big way. This reselling movement as well around people buying something and then selling it on a platform has been a significant growth trajectory. And there's billions of dollars worth of secondhand goods that end up in landfill that could be repurposed. So we work with a charity partner, Good 360, that actually ensures that product that some retailers don't even sell, that it's excess merchandise from Christmas, etc., that in the past would have been put to landfill, is now being repurposed for charitable purposes. So there's a whole suite of initiatives, and there's this whole thing around the customer having a much more stronger purpose around where they put their dollar, where they spend it, and the loyalty is being formed really around their sustainability credentials. It's a big movement that retailers are getting behind. Not all, but the majority are, and it's something I'm proud to be leading because it's the next biggest issue, I guess, coming out of COVID.
Yeah, Paul, that's another area of focus for cyber. These kids are all throwing their stuff online, and I don't think they think twice about it.
I think that's the thing. So it comes back to, because it's in the consumer's interest and the retailer's interest to make sure that cybersecurity is taken seriously and that it's managed appropriately. And the thing is, often, even in some of those platforms, like, there can be dodginess there where you might be sending a product to somebody you're selling and you don't get the cash till they've received it, but in fact the person that's received has is a fraudster. So all of these aspects of actually not dealing with genuine customers, as Richard mentioned, it's really important that companies get their heads around.
It's great to watch the kids come up with these new ideas. Honestly, the Depops of the world that are doing that circular economy and sharing those clothes around. I saw one this week. I had a call with a company this week that's basically authenticating well-known dresses. So, for example, if you have a Zimmerman dress and you want to sell that secondhand, you can have it authenticated by Zimmerman and sold on the Zimmerman website. So it's real and it's authentic, and there's no fraud happening. So I think there's definitely a lot of innovation going on in that space. So what are some of the biggest challenges that the ARA are experiencing this year, Paul? I mean, we know it's tough times. The consumer confidence is probably at an all-time low. I live in Potts Point here, and some of the restaurants here they're not as full as they used to be. So people are watching their spending. Are you seeing that happening a lot?
So there's no doubt, even though that the industry's done actually in essence quite well through COVID, because of course there's all that stimulus, people couldn't travel, our savings went up to like 280 billion or something, was a significant number. And of course that money, it's dwindling down, but there's still a lot of money in people's savings accounts. But of course interest rates are starting to hit, the cost of living pressures, which you spoke about, fuel prices, the war in Ukraine, labour shortages that are crippling the industry. So, to have somebody serve in a restaurant, you're having to pay them more than what the minimum wage is. So these are all adding to the cost. So, my experience has all been mainly in department stores. And the beauty about managing a department store, particularly a premium one, is you see the economy before everybody else does. So you see the up cycle and you see the down cycle. And the first thing that goes in a down cycle is discretionary spend. So what you'll see that the restaurants were exceptionally busy post as we come out of lockdowns, because people wanted that feel that they were on holidays and wanted the full experience. But today is a very different experience. Short-staffed, can't take full bookings, and of course we're now sort of seeing main meals at sort of $50 to $70 in a restaurant that may not have been positioned premium because they're just trying to cover their costs. So again, people that have limited discretionary spend will say, well, actually, it's cheaper for me to go and spend that on a trolley of half trolley of groceries and cook from home. So there's no doubt this is starting to bite. We're remaining fairly positive in the industry because still people see the wealth in their homes in Australia. There's high savings, but it will be short-lived unless something is to change. So interest rates will continue to rise, and it's a challenging industry, challenging right now to see in the next. Certainly the later part of this year, next year will be challenging, there's no doubt.
And Paul, what's that going to do to, Richard, what's that going to do to budgets for cyber? I mean, there's got to be a lot of money allocated for budgets for cyber because it's a number one issue on every board right now. So what do you think it's going to do to budgets with this downturn?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there, Carl, just following on from what Paul was saying. I think, discretionary spend is going to come under some increased pressure. And I think with that, how retailers can provide a more personalised and curated journey for their customers to make sure that they can capitalise on the spend that is available. And again, that starts on understanding who it is that you're actually dealing with really early in the customer journey, so you can then start providing them with that personalised and curated journey. I think that's the first point. The second is, and again, similarly to the kind of subscription style business that we're seeing that Paul referred to, we've seen some area as well. But I think being able to position protection in a subscription basis that is aligned very closely to business value and is monetized appropriately based on the risk and the outcome that you're looking to drive. I think we're going to see more of that.
Yes.
I think the organizations that can provide that personalized, curated journey and do so in a way and spend dollars on cybersecurity that is commensurate with the risk that you're looking to mitigate and aligned to direct business drivers like reducing card abandonment, like improving customer experience, like reducing fraud and chargebacks. I think that's where the spending is going to go.
One of the things that people don't realize is that it is real, this cybersecurity thing. I've actually been hacked. I was at home in my Darling Point place before a couple of years ago, and I came to my desktop one day, and my mouse was moving by itself, putting files into a folder on my desktop. And I freaked out. I didn't know what was going on, so I shut it down. I called my friend Andrew Webster, who was the head of cybersecurity at Westpac. I said, Andrew, what the hell is going on? He said, come and bring your laptop to me. We sat down, he opened it up, he tethered, and he said, yep, a live one. It was literally a live hacker trying to encrypt all my files. And I had no idea how this happened. It was a sleeping bit of software that I clicked a couple of years ago. It was time-based, it opened up, and all of a sudden this communication stream was off to Europe, and away they went. And this is a real thing. So, I mean, same question to both of you. What's the one thing, if you could change over the next 12 months, what's the one thing that you'd really like to move the dial over?
In relation to cybersecurity or just broadly?
No. Well, one in retail and one in cyber. I mean, you go first, Paul. So I think.
Well, look, yeah, that's sure, no problem at all. I mean, look, just taking on your comment. I mean, I was watching a news feed recently, and I guess the professionalism for what one might say these fraudsters is beyond comprehension. Where you might Google your bank, and you go into that to sign into your banking, and of course the link's not a real link. It's one of the big four, and you're automatically transferring, giving access to your bank accounts. I think that's the biggest horror. I think there's horrors in retail banking is a bigger concern, of course, access to your own banking pieces. So I just thought I'd throw that in because it just, the more and more you get around this subject, you realise there's more to worry about and be concerned about. Look, the biggest issue that we're driving, other than sustainability and the road to net zero, I guess, is really around diversity, equality, and inclusion within the industry. So, 75% of spending in retail is done by women, and about 57% of the workforce are female. But when you look at leadership positions in the retail industry, it's only 17%. So it's significantly different. There's a 15% pay gap between male and female within the industry. So we launched our gender equality positioning statement, and asking retailers to sign up. We've already got 20 big brands that have signed up to it, and that's something we're really keen to do. Now, the reason why I'm raising this is because when I joined my background as the head of a department store in the 90s, there was only one woman on the board. Now, you've got to argue that you take a risk perspective, and all these men were middle-aged, and no, this is not disparaging, middle-aged white men that didn't shop, so they didn't see a lot of the disruptions that were coming their way. So, if you think about de-risking your organisation, diversifying. As we talk about investments, you always diversify your investments. The same thing when it comes to your talent. And I think partly understanding the retail environment around the retail and consumer is really important, that women have a strong leadership role in the decision making. So things like cybersecurity and other risk factors are taken seriously because they're shopping, they understand the complexities and the pitfalls as well. So that's something we're driving, and we're really proud of where we're heading with both those two big leadership pillars, but there's a way to go.
Exactly. There's we see that across our executives as well, Paul. There's a disparity between the number of females and males hosting the meetings that we've got. We'd love to see that increase. I mean, we've got some amazing business leaders who are big supporters of ours, female business leaders, and yeah, we'd like to see a lot more of that diversity
Right.
happening as well. Richard, what about what about you? What would you like to move over the next 12 months?
Yeah, I'll just echo Paul's point first. Is the research is conclusive. Diversity in leadership in all sorts of in all of its guises in terms of diversity is categorically good for business, and we all need to take responsibility in making sure that we sort of keep pushing that forward.
Yeah.
As it relates to cybersecurity, if you look at 80% of every logon attempt in the back half of 2020 was fraudulent. Over 60% of all data breaches relate to password and authenticated issues. So if we think of what are the biggest things that can really help retailers over the next sort of 12 to 24 months, certainly from a cybersecurity perspective, poor authentication, particularly usernames and passwords, are the root cause of so many issues. The technology is now available at appropriate and commensurate price points where retailers can completely remove the need for their customers to have usernames and passwords, therefore solving whole categories of issues, exactly like you were referring to, Carl, with yours, man-in-the-middle attacks or credential stuffing or brute force attacks. We've got all of these strange names. Essentially, they're all serving, and they're all the root cause of all of these is poor authentication with usernames and passwords. From a retail perspective, if we can look at completely eradicating that, provide a far better customer experience and a far better security outcome, I think the retail industry would be very appreciative of that, and that's certainly our mission at Transmit.
Paul, Richard, I just want to thank you both for bringing lots of value to this podcast, and I think there's a lot of people who've got a lot of good things from it. And we're extremely grateful for the time that you've invested, and Rebecca, Vicky, Priyanka, and the team, and I are all very, very grateful for your support. This one meeting has helped 18 seriously ill kids for Starlight, and I think this month we're up to 60 or 70 meetings. It's over $30,000 that will go to Starlight this month as a result of these meetings, which is really nice. And you talk about a business where you get up every day and you go to work and you're just putting smiles on kids' faces. That just lights me up. So for anyone that wants to learn more, what's the best way to gain more resources to connect with you both? Should we put the links in the description?
For me, it's quite simple. We have a really we've just upgraded our website, and it's continuing to be upgraded. But there's a resource center there. But equally, you can reach out to me directly. There's an information line there that we respond to. But anyone within the retail community wants connection to the retail community, the website's the best place to start. So thank you too, Carl, for your time.
Hey, Paul. I've got one thing that I'd love to know about. This back in my head, I just go, what have you done? Do you remember when Catch got bought by Wesfarmers?
Yes.
So then COVID hit, and so Catch got bought at a bargain basement price because, it went for 230 million or whatever it was, and then COVID hit, and every other online retailer went through the roof with their sales.
Yes.
But Catch actually fell off a cliff.
Yes.
What do you think is going to happen? Do you think Wesfarmers is going to sell it back to Gabby?
Well, look, I'm not sure about that. I can't speculate on what. I know they still do broadly about $1 billion worth of sales, so it's a big organisation still. It's not profitable. I think that's the biggest concern. Those sorts of deal type retailers do well when traditional retailers are doing badly. So it all goes in cycles because they get access to excess inventory. That's the reason why. But I don't think so. I think they've gone in with it. I can't talk for Wesfarmers, of course, but they would have gone into this with a view of a long-term investment, and that will take time. And I think they've only had it for a couple of years. So I think you give them a little bit more time before you cut them at the knees, is my view.
Yeah, it's an interesting place. I love Gabby. Gabby's been a big supporter of the meetings that we've been doing. So,
right.
Richard, any final words?
Yeah, just Carl, I think what you guys are driving at meetmagic is fantastic. I think for profit, for good, make things really sustainable, and I just want to congratulate you and the team on the great work you're doing. Anyone that wants to find out and connect with us, transmitsecurity.com, but the best way is just ping me on LinkedIn. If you're looking at how help improve your customer experience, reduce cart abandonment, and significantly draw down your security risk, we'd love to have a conversation.
And surely that has to be the message of the day. You know, times are going to be tough, sales are going to be down. You want to reduce the abandonment, keep your profits coming in. That surely has to be a focus for many retailer that's selling online. Surely.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate your time. And I don't know, Phoebe, if you can come and